Good morning, everybody, and thank you for inviting me to speak today. Thank you to Julianne for bringing me across the border, and for those that have put together this incredible, supercharged, action-packed program. It's a testament to WA and the amazing projects that have been delivered right across the country. My name's Penny Schulz, for those of you that don't know me. I work for the SA Drought Hub. We also have a really long name, like the Southwest Hub. We just call ourselves the SA Drought Hub as well. I'm employed through the University of Adelaide in a livestock adoption officer role, very much focused on farmer adoption in the livestock space. I also have a sheep and beef operation that my husband and I run in the Limestone Coast and about 2 hours southeast of Adelaide, and then also wear a couple of other hats in the NRM, sustainable primary production and climate change space. So you can see a bit of a theme happening there in my life. And I'm here to talk about a containment feeding program that was focused on sheep in South Australia. It was led by the SA Drought Hub, in collaboration with a number of farming systems groups, or grower groups as they're called here in WA, but organically ended up working across the border as well, and I'll tell you a bit more about that as we go along. I'm going to leave plenty of time for questions. That was my aim today, and also conscious for a smidge behind, and for those of you that do know me, morning tea is my favourite meal of the day, and I don't want to miss that or jeopardise that either. That's meant to be my first slide. So with all adoption projects, we start with the why. Why are we doing this? And for this project, containment feeding at strategic times can be really beneficial to sheep enterprises and beef cattle enterprises. This particular project focused just on sheep, particularly during tough seasonal conditions, which a number of regions across the country have been experiencing, and not just this past year. Many regions experienced what we're calling a failed spring in 2023, and that was certainly happening at the time when we were developing this project. But deciding when containment feeding happens in a livestock business and how to implement the best system for your farm in your environment is actually really tricky to navigate. But we know that there's benefits. We heard, I think it was Sarah that was speaking on the video before. You can improve your productivity, improve your reproductive performance, improve your landscape management, talking about, better pasture recovery, and maintaining ground cover in those really tricky seasons. And that can all add to that business resilience and drought resilience of your farm business. And while these reasons are reasonably well known, we know that the adoption of best practice containment feeding is not high, although it's pretty high now, considering what we've been through. A lot of people have kind of been forced down that track. But that lack of support in decision making and implementing a really good system for your farm was lacking, and we wanted to shift people from just being aware and building their knowledge to actually implementing things on farm that were beneficial to their actual farm business. So before I get into the nitty-gritties of what the actual project was, talk a little bit about the background. So I guess from I will talk a little bit about the project first. So we wanted to ensure, and I guess this is the what. So the people that are extension practitioners, this is the what of the project. I said why we're doing it. This is the what of the project. So this is about boosting the adoption of really good containment feeding systems, build the resources and the support for producers, build the capacity of advisors to be able to support the producers to design, plan, implement, put things in on farm. We were finding there was just one or two people that everybody was going to for this information. That was putting lots of pressure on them. We can't clone them, but we can build up other people's capacity. And also establish a regional network of expertise. So, one of the cool words that are used is like a community of practice, but a bunch of advisors that are being upskilled and can speak with each other about the challenges that they're facing. So as far as the background goes, while this particular project was South Australian Hub led, it actually came from, and I'll pay homage to, a significant cross-hub proposal that went up to the Extension and Adoption FDF grant process, which actually started as a project probably 2 years ago now. That wasn't successful, and it was quite a large and expensive project, but it wasn't successful. In the background, unbeknownst to some of the others that were involved in the project, which was also Riverine Plains and Southern Farming Systems, and Tassie was on board too if we could get up and running. I applied to the South Australian Sheep Industry Fund, and not all states have this type of fund, but we did, and they did give me some money, nowhere near what we probably needed to make it run. And we said to them, look, if we don't get that really big grant, can you please still give us the money, and the SA Drought Hub will partner with you and we'll deliver this in South Australia. So that's what we did, but there was a huge need, not just in South Australia with our tough seasonal conditions that we're building, and we didn't know then, but that was the start of a really long dry period. But Tasmania were going through an extremely dry period there as well, and southwest Victoria. Also turns out southwest WA was as well, but at the time this project wasn't connected there. So we needed to make it run, come hell or high water. In the end, we developed and delivered a Train the Trainer program and built some resources to support that. So they had a resource guide, they had implementation plans to work through with farmers. We piloted a new producer learning program, which had its own resource set for it as well. We developed a ration app, which started off a really basic spreadsheet, just a little bit more than what the New South Wales drought feed calculator, for those that are aware of that one, was, but has since been further developed to be a basic ration tool as well as a decision-making tool, and will be made available to all that are participating in that program. And we did all that in about 4 months. So the time was there, the need was there, so we pulled out our finger and went like the clappers. And then after that, we delivered more producer workshops and ensured that all the producers that participated in those workshops had one-on-one follow-up on farm with a newly trained advisor to build an implementation plan for their farm. We ended up with 15 advisors trained in the Train the Trainer. Only 6 of those were from South Australia, but we felt that we couldn't just be closed-minded, that we needed to be contributing to all regions with this program. So they came from Tassie, they came from Victoria, they came from just across the border into New South Wales. We delivered 5 pilot program small producer group programs in South Australia, reached 50 farmers, and more than that were reached interstate as well. So those trained advisors took all those resources and used them in Tassie, they used them in Hamilton, they used them wherever they needed to run the program. The producer groups were about 7 to 12 farmers in a group, and then each of those producers was then followed up by that newly trained advisor. So right now, we have a network of trained advisors. We've piloted the Train the Trainer program. We've piloted a producer learning program. And with some tweaking, which is reasonably minor, this program will be available and usable to many others beyond the life of this project. So we're talking about probably January next year. I hope to make a fair bit of it publicly available and others can grab it and run with it too. Nearly all the producer participants that started have a new or improved containment feeding system, or at the very least have a plan, an implementation plan that they can enact when the time is right for their business, noting that the need to containment feed and how that happens on your farm varies from business to business. And sometimes a decision not to containment feed is actually the right one. So I'm not saying we're like the containment feeding police, where we're forcing everybody to make containment feeding a part of their sheep or cattle business. And as you heard in the video, that operation have actually used it 4 times in the last 5. And often I'm going to guess that how long and what animals go into that containment feeding would differ from year to year, and one year they didn't need to use it,
Hi,
and that
I'm
was a
Luke
really good
Hickey,
business decision
farm.
for them. And from using those newer improved systems on farm, I'm hoping those producers are seeing the benefits, but generally those things are longer term, they're harder to measure and require some ongoing support and follow-up. So that's going to lead us into a new phase of this project. At the moment, we are going through the evaluation phase of this project, pulling all the feedback sheets and all the rest of it in together. But I can definitely already see from the verbal feedback that we've had about what's worked well and what hasn't. And this is a really important part of any project that you run, that you need to do this. The small producer groups that kickstarted that producer learning program, no surprises, that was an absolute winner. That's a great way to start a program. When you pull producers together in a smaller group, they can learn from each other. They're all there for the same reason. And then the advisor can sort of top up their knowledge where required. That follow-up support on farm with each of those producers by that advisor, no surprises there. That's a pretty good thing to help with adoption, but that's expensive and time-consuming. So that's where a fair bit of the costing went. And the advisor trained the trainer. We pulled them all into the Barossa Valley for 2 days, and I can show you the field trip did not include wineries, although that was a little bit tempting. But they got to see a range of containment feeding systems, from temporary, cheap, how's you going, all the way up to a pretty high-tech borderline feedlot system, and be able to learn together for 2 days, have dinner together, and that group has come back for master classes for additional training and check-ins online. So I hope to find funding to keep that group going, because it's really valuable to do that. So what didn't work well? So I had to put my little honesty hat on there when I was thinking about this. Some of the advisors needed a lot more support to deliver this program than others, and we didn't factor that in well enough. So that was time, mentoring support, and unfortunately that resulted in a complete region not being serviced by their trained advisor, and some producers were not followed up and reached when they should have been and expected to be. So we've taken that on board. We needed to include more time and money to enable co-delivery with experienced people, and so that advisors could be mentored as much as they needed it. In saying that, I will acknowledge there were 2 newer, younger advisors who absolutely nailed this pilot program, and the region that didn't get service was actually an older, more experienced person. So, we've really got to think about how we do this better into the future. The program was not perfect and a little rushed, and we made a call to go ahead with an imperfect pilot program because the need was there, rather than spend an additional 6 months to make it really amazing, to make it perfect and completely miss the timing boat. Now, I've put that in the little negative list because it was not ideal, but I have no regrets in doing that. It put the pressure on, but I'd rather have something that's sort of 85% there and meet the farmers' needs, and it ended up being a terrible season going forward. So, yeah, certainly no regrets, but not ideal. It's not common to run with things quite like that, and it does make people feel like they really need to be agile, and we do. But mind you, it really taught us something, because all the programs that we've run since for managing the dry times have been much the same and on the hop. So, but the amount of funding did really limit our reach and ability for this project. But I think we say that with every project, don't we, when we get there? Oh, wish we could have done more. Wish we had more money. So what's happening right now? Need to finish the evaluation. I should have done that already. And tidy up those resources as well so I can make them available to everybody. That containment feeding app is an absolute ripper. So I'm going to try and find funding to make that available to everybody as well, not just the people that have done this pilot program. As it stands, that it's a tool, not an app, and you need a certain level of understanding and knowledge in that space to be able to use it. We're assessing the potential to further extend and scale up this project, which of course requires finding some additional funds. We hope to extend this another 12 to 18 months with new and existing producers. We want to include southern beef producers and include fodder production and conservation, which sort of go hand in hand with this. I think in Southwest WA there's been a program and some extension around hay and silage. Theo's given me a thumbs up. We had something similar running in South Australia as well, particularly in the south part of South Australia, and it made sense in the end that if we're going to continue work in that space, they need to come together. Spoiler alert, we are developing version 2.0 of this project already, and my counterpart Hannah Griffiths, who is unfortunately not in WA, she's back in South Australia, but she's literally writing this up as we speak so we can try and secure the funding into the new year. That project, version 2.0, will include some validation of improvements in business and landscape resilience. We use those terms a lot. There's not a heap of actually published data in that space or how big that is. So we're actually working I think it's really important that we do have numbers around that and we do validate it. As I mentioned, we don't want to be the containment feeding police. We know it does make businesses more resilient, but there's definitely going to be a tipping point about businesses because we don't want to increase their cost of production just so they can have a fancy containment feeding system. And there's some other R&D aspects around pasture recovery and ground cover measurements, as well as some animal health challenges as well for those that have been involved with containment feeding systems. Once you really push the bar with those systems, you can end up with some animal health issues that are not in textbooks. So we want to try and learn more about that so that we can provide ongoing help and advice when it's required. A big shout out to Deb Scammell from Talking Livestock. She's the nutritionist / containment feeding expert that we use in this project. She was also going to be the linchpin for the larger cross-hub project, and this project wouldn't have happened without her. Cam Nicholson, for those that might know Cam, he's been around for a while, bit of a wise owl. He helped a lot with some specialist tools and advisor training. The Tassie Drought Hub, who just jumped on board with this without actually knowing much about it at the start, and the farming systems groups as well, and the advisors that rocked up to a train the trainer from as far away as Tassie, actually without knowing anything about it, which I realised when they got there. So they had some faith in what we were doing. The timing and the need was there for them as well, so they took a punt and came along. But I'm also happy to talk with you while we're here in WA about other livestock projects that we have running. I'm a part of two big projects, one beef, one sheep, that have significant feet and funding in WA, which is really exciting, and it means I might get let back in here a few more times over the next few years, which is really good. So happy to take questions.
Thank you, Penny. There are some roving mics if anybody does have a question for Penny who would like to start. Theo, did you have a question? No. Oh, stood up and made eye contact at the wrong time, haven't you? There's one over here.
Oh. Who's got it? Thank you. Thanks for the presentation, Penny. I'm just interested in your experience or views in containment feeding and how it's sort of viewed by the government in particularly pastoral leasehold land. I've had a few clients very interested in it but found it quite challenging to work that process to get approvals to put one in and sort of show the value of it in a broader sense in the landscape rather than just the sacrifice you might make to that small area.
Yeah. We have the same challenge in South Australia. We have a pastoral board and a pastoral act which doesn't allow for containment feeding. Mind you, I think that act was built in like the 70s or something like that. That's the last, and it's, when it has been, they've tried to review it a couple of times with one of those being the reason that it's quite inflexible and dated. I hope that it does actually change because I think a lot of the things that go into those sort of acts and guidelines is around trying to manage the landscape, and containment feeding's a classic of how you can actually do that really well, but you've got to manage it well. So, yeah, I think there has been, back in the day when we used to declare droughts, we don't do that anymore, there used to be some special dispensation on those laws, so you could actually do some very temporary containment feeding in the north, but yeah, that hasn't happened this past year, so I don't have a solution for that aside from legislative change. But maybe our project, if we do actually get some numbers on the benefits to the landscape, not just to the business, that may help make change, yeah.
Do you have any other questions for Penny? If you do have a question, I'd love to know who you are and where you're from as well, so Penny can address them. But Penny, before you go, as you say, you're coming to the end of your project. Yep. 2.0 is coming up. Are you hoping that that is something that West Australian producers will get involved in?
Oh, absolutely. And I hope to make everything that we've built so far available to all hubs, and to all the groups that are associated with hubs. We don't do things in isolation, and when we've got issues like that, we're never alone. So that's the idea. And with Mark too, if there's interest in the Southwest Hub, absolutely. Yep.
So early next year, you say?
Yes.
Fingers crossed.
Yep. Potentially by Christmas, we'll see.
No pressure.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for coming along. I'll get you to come over this way if that's all right, Penny.